リアルにそのグランツーリスモというゲームの、あり方みたいなものを僕がイメージしたのは15歳の時。
When I first pictured realistically the way Gran Turismo should be, I was 15 years old.
運転のリアルさということと、あとその車の
There are two key factors:
本物の車を入れるというか、
realistic driving and realistic cars.
する上で
These are the fundamentals of Gran Turismo.
Gran Turismo という企画自体はですね、
Gran Turismo was my first game idea after I joined Sony. Well, I submitted about 100 plans, and the very first one was Gran Turismo. There weren't any racing games around that displayed the handling, control, and feel of real cars when you played the game. It was in 1992. It was rejected initially. So I decided to start with whatever I could get my hands on. Three of us first made Motortoon Grand Prix. It looked like a cartoon-style racing game on the surface, but the game itself was very serious. It became the first title from the newly established Sony Computer Entertainment. That was Motortoon Grand Prix. It was a kind of industry competition in which team could create the best software within the short space of time between the arrival of prototype hardware and the release of the console. We managed to produce a high-quality title in a small amount of time. We sort of got the credit. Motortoon Grand Prix didn't represent the world that I wanted to create. What we can say is that Motortoon Grand Prix was preparation for Gran Turismo. PlayStation was the first commercial hardware that utilized 3D polygon technology. If PlayStation didn't have such functionality, I wouldn't have dreamed of making a game like Gran Turismo.
みたいなゲームを作ろうとは思わなかったですから。
Making cars look as cool as possible is a significant theme for us. We had some technical breakthroughs during the making of the original Gran Turismo. The most obvious one was to show reflections on the cars. It was said to be impossible on PlayStation. What can I say? We've always respected the individuality of cars. Every car has been recreated with trim that was released. We had no idea whether it was achievable or not, but we felt it was the right thing to do. We had faith in it. There were 2 years between GT1 and GT2. 2 years.
GT1 から GT2 は2年ですね。
When we made Gran Turismo 1 and 2, we achieved 90% of what we wanted with Gran Turismo 1 and completed the rest with GT2. So in the 2 years of making Gran Turismo 2, we diversified the direction. We managed to refine it and speed it up by a further 25%. We included 500 cars from all over the world. GT1 sold unexpectedly well in Europe and the States. GT1 was aimed at Japan, so with GT2 we aimed at the world, including a larger number of cars and so on. By the time GT2 was completed, we'd already started working on GT3. We split up into 2 teams and started GT3 development. During the 2 years of making GT2, we developed GT3 for a year at the same time.
もう作り始めていたんですよ。
I think we've developed 90% of the potential of the console. We worked hard up to the point where we weren't able to make improvements without considerably more development time. There were new discoveries every day when it was developed. I didn't know it could do this, something like that. We thought, we'll include everything PlayStation 2 allows us to do, and that's how we made it. To achieve a truly realistic driving feeling and car modelling, as I planned at the beginning, was impossible to do with PlayStation. So at last we can create the true form of GT with GT3, the way Gran Turismo should be. I love cars and play all kinds of racing games. When I developed Gran Turismo, it was simple. I created what I wanted, and I wanted to create my dream.
自分が一番欲しいと思うものを作りたいと。 仕事してないと言ってもですね、もう僕ら実は6年間
We've been working non-stop for 6 years. We didn't have any holidays for New Year or Christmas. We'll soon be able to have some time off for the first time in 6 years. At one point, I couldn't go home for 4 months, till the master was completed. I had to bring my bed into the office. Looking back, it's extraordinary that I spent so much energy within a certain space of my life. One thing I'm sure of is that it will all have been worth it.
Kazunori Yamauchi is the producer of Gran Turismo. Launched in Japan on the 28th of April, GT3 contains many significant improvements on GT2. Here he takes us through some of the most important developments.
Let me see, what is the most significant development? First of all, number of frames was increased to 60 per second. So in Europe it's up from 25 to 50 frames. That means that the volume of information per second is doubled, and the resolution is doubled vertically and horizontally as well. And the force feedback steering wheel is an important addition. You can actually feel bumps in the road and resistance when turning. It adds greatly to the realism of the experience. We succeeded in reflecting the scenery on cars this time. It only expressed the atmosphere surrounding the cars before, but now when a car runs under trees, the body reflects them. And when a car comes under a billboard, we can see it gliding across the paintwork. The body reflects the edge of the road and everything. We can also express metallic colours, which was impossible with GT2.
Careful cooperation with major car manufacturers has enabled the team to build in-game versions of cars that may be as much as 2 years from the market. The Lancer Evolution 7 was included in the game before the actual car went on sale, and players will be able to test Nissan's new Z series and the Mazda RX-8 long before real-life drivers get the chance.
There are 200 cars in the game, but it took great effort to make one car, dozens of times more than GT2. We put huge energy into it. There are only 200 of them, but the value of each car is priceless. We produced one car a day with Gran Turismo 2. It took at least 1 month to make a car this time. When you choose one, you'll feel as if you received a precious gift. I'd like everyone to enjoy it that way.
GT3 features many courses with varying road conditions, such as dirt tracks and rain. Each course has its own peculiar details which affect the quality of the driving, such as low friction on wet roads and realistic handling on the dirt tracks.
The night course has always been featured in the Gran Turismo series, and this time we showered the night course with rain. We imagined how beautiful it would be to have night course in rain, as there's so many different kinds of lights. The road surface reflects them. We could see splendid scenery in our heads and decided to design a wet course in town at night. The wet road surface has very low friction, and cars behave, how can I put it, they're unstable. You need to drive very delicately.
In order to open GT3 out to a wider audience, many game modes have been introduced for first-time players, but without compromising the highly technical aspect of the simulation. The physics model has become even more realistic, and although driving the game is far more complex, the cars are actually easier to drive.
The process of making the physics model is done in our heads. It's to do with imagination. We think how cars should be, the tyres and steering and so on. The car's behaviour is a result of this process. We believe that when you drive it, you will understand how a real car behaves. The calculation is 100 times more accurate this time. It enables the physics model to express subtle nuances, so I think you can feel the relation between the front tyres and road surface, which was impossible before. The driving feel used to be rougher, but it's much more delicate now. It means it's much easier to drive.
Improvements in the game's artificial intelligence programming create a far greater degree of realism than was previously possible. The game can now provide such fierce competition that only the most experienced players will be able to compete.
The artificial intelligence will be faster than most players this time. It doesn't mean that it has become a tougher game to play, just that the artificial intelligence is cleverer than before and drives like a human. The race has become more exciting and realistic. The artificial intelligence is doing its best on the track, just like a human does. You can probably feel the difference when you play against it.
Gran Turismo established the idea of running replays after a race is over. Other racing games followed suit, and in an effort to stay ahead, Polyphony have featured a replay function which is synchronized to music. The game selects the camera angles, cuts automatically, and synchronizes to whichever music is chosen from the large soundtrack library.
PlayStation 2になって、一度に出せるボイスの数がですね、2倍になったんですね。
The number of output channels doubled with PlayStation 2, so engine noise is more full. We managed to reproduce wind noise this time and road noise, the sound of the tyres moving across the road surface. These sounds have much more depth this time. You'd be surprised by the sound quality when you connect it to a proper audio system.
The inclusion of iLink technology has made it possible to link up to 6 PS2s together and compete with real players. Although the number of potential users of such a function may as yet be limited, Yamauchi believes that by including it, an increasing number of players will eventually come to accept it as a standard, paving the way for a future network version of Gran Turismo.
As a package title game, as a standalone game, we did everything we can. There isn't anything to be done, basically. Gran Turismo 3 is probably the final version of pre-network Gran Turismo. The future Gran Turismo will have development in the network area. I'm not thinking of just a simple racing game between networked players, even if I accept real-time racing as a function. I'm planning it to be something more. We're actually planning it with the name of GTN. It's an equivalent of GT4 and will be out next year at the earliest. It might be delayed and nothing is certain. We made an announcement of Gran Turismo Network, GTN, at the GT3 launch party in Japan the other day. It's not going to be a simple online battle game. We're planning something interesting at the moment. I think Gran Turismo is the sort of software which makes a dream real. In a sense, the quality is excessive. It's a characteristic of Gran Turismo that includes everything up to the point of excess. There are some staff members who weren't interested in cars before GT, and they love cars now, working with GT. The car enthusiasts are growing in number. It's our baby, raised by our team till recently. When I see so many users surrounding it, it's extremely moving.
Motegi is the place where the Polyphony team come to check out ideas for GT3. As the production schedule winds down, they're here to try a bit of real driving. We grabbed a few minutes with Kazunori Yamauchi to talk about his love of motorsport.
そうですね。多分僕が、10歳、9
When I was 9 or
歳
10 years old, the Formula One Grand Prix was held in Japan. Although I was only a primary school pupil, I managed to watch most of it on TV, and it left a strong impression on me, as it was the first time I'd seen world-class car racing. Drivers like Mario Andretti were driving Formula One at that time, and I guess that was my first experience of motorsport. These days I love anything to do with cars and racing, particularly Formula One, of course. But I'm also a great fan of WRC Rally. And although I haven't tried rallying before, I have driven on dirt tracks. It was only after the release of the first Gran Turismo that the team and I started to venture out to real racing courses. We had been practicing on the game and had many images of driving in our heads, so when I first tried it on a real track, I was amazed that it moved as I had imagined.
ドライビングのイメージっていうのは出来上がってたんですけれども、実際トラックに行って本当に走ってみたらですね、自分が思った通りに車が動くもんですから、すごくびっくりしました。 今のところはその、
At the moment, I only drive on tracks with production cars.
使った
I've never driven Formula cars. I use a Lancer Evolution GTR and so on. They're tuned to suit circuit runs, which is where I drive them. When you want to drive normal production cars on circuits, you have to upgrade your car's durability accordingly. So you have to modify parts such as radiators, oil coolers and engines. I've made many modifications to the Lancer Evolution, but it's not a really radical tuning.
エンジンとかいろんなところを細かく F1 もあとルマンにも
I've been to Le Mans twice now, and I'm planning to go back this year as well. I go to see GT as well as all kinds of other races, when I have time, which isn't very often.
あればあんまりないんですけどヨーロッパでしたら、スパフラン
In Europe, I'd like to drive Spa-Francorchamps, and the Grand Prix course in Monaco too. I've driven the route of the Grand Prix dozens of times when the race is not on, but I wish I could drive it in the actual race.
何十ラップもしてるんですけれども本当にグランプリコースになった時にですねこれも暇さえあればと思ってたんですね
I've often thought of getting a sports license and competing, but I've never had time. Now that we've finished with Gran Turismo 3, I'd like to try various races such as the one-make races held in Japan. You compete under equal conditions and the cars are not too powerful. For instance, they're Beetle Cup or Elise Cup standard. At the time I was drawn into motorsport, Ayrton Senna was becoming a star. Unfortunately, he's now dead, but I think he was the one who first showed me the enjoyment and pleasure of motorsport. Of today's drivers, I think Juan Pablo Montoya is brilliant.
ですね、トミマキネンとは2回ぐらい会ったことがあってですね。
I've met Tommy Mäkinen a couple of times, and both times he drove Gran Turismo. First GT1 and then GT3. Both he and I drove a time trial, and I was faster than him by 0.2 of a second. It was his first experience of driving Gran Turismo 3, and he was slower than me, only by 0.2 of a second. I was astonished. It was such great fun for Mäkinen that he forgot it was a game. He asked if we could make some alterations, such as stiffening up the suspension as if he was referring to a real car. Then we realised that arguments like how it's different from real cars or whether it's a game or not don't really matter. And we realised that he was driving GT as a real car. That pleased me immensely.